Good morning. Good morning. Hello, everybody. This is Eric Guy at Center for Victory. We're having a webinar today with one of my wonderful friends, Dave Nast. He's going to walk us through some of his expertise and how he's used the Predictive Index in the past, and currently with the folks, the clients that and companies that he works with. To get better results through people and leverage people inside their company. So Dave's up there. You can see his bullet points, but I'm going to hand it over to him for just a few minutes and let him introduce himself. So go ahead, Dr. Dave.
Thanks, Eric. Great to be on today. I appreciate this. So I'm an old school headhunter. I've got about 25 years experience in doing it. I worked third party with contingency and retained firms. I owned a retained search firm for 7 years. And I've also been inside HR talent acquisition as well. So I've been on both sides of the house when it comes to recruiting talent. Used the Predictive Index for about half of that time. And for all types of positions, whether it be C-level on down to $12 an hour seasonal employees, we've used PI for that.
Wonderful. Anything else we need to know about you?
Well, my pattern's up on the screen. I'm a persuader. I'll probably live up to that. Probably talk too much today.
So yeah, the both of us have that high B. So what that might mean to some people that are logging on that don't quite know is so Dave's kind of a high impact, under pressure kind of person. Big picture, very strategic, doesn't need a lot of rules. Actually just needs a small outline to do a webinar like this, right, Dave?
That's right.
And
we're winging it.
Yeah, and loves to talk. We do have an outline. We did get on a call and went over it, but we didn't have to do the whole outline. We just got one page of bullet points, and it's going to be good. The thing we're going to have to do, Dave, is try to keep this to a half an hour, 35 minutes, and then we'll let, as we usually do, folks ask questions. You answer them for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll let everybody get back to their work lives. All right?
Sounds good.
Okay, so the first question I have for you, Dave, is really around the hiring process. So specifically with PI, using analytics in really the decision-making process. I've found, and you can chime in here, so I guess I'm asking you, how have you found it to be significant in just the whole in general hiring process? I know I say a lot of times it takes the subjectivity out, it makes it more objective, but can you give us why somebody would use analytics, especially something like PI, to help them in their hiring process?
Yeah, it's funny. You'll have some really experienced hiring managers. They're really savvy. They've been around the block. They develop people well, and they'll go with their gut during the hiring process. And you'll hear them say things like, "Oh, I just like that person," or so and so. And I have found in my experience that they get it right 50% of the time. So I'd rather get it closer to 90% of the time. And in using PI, adding the objective data to the process brings a lot to it. I find that, we tend to hire people for what they know. We spend a lot of time in the briefcase looking at people's knowledge, skills, and experience, and that's what's on the resume. And if we only hire to that changes rapidly over time. Every single person on this call can go out this afternoon and get more knowledge, skills, and experience. So you're chasing a moving target, where the stuff that PI measures, the behavioral and the cognitive, that's stable over time. And I'm not a proponent of doing just one of them. I'm a proponent of doing it all. So it helps inform the talent decision quite a bit and brings that objectivity to it. And when people argue with me on a candidate, I just say, well, the science says blah, 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 blah. And that's the way I phrase my sentences, because it is objective and you can't argue with it.
Right. And one of the things that I've liked for years about the PI is this whole idea of forming the job assessment prior to even looking at candidates, because then it's just about whether they fit or not, right?
Yeah, the job assessment to me is the secret sauce. And not only just for the open positions that you do, if you do them enough, you can eventually map the entire company. The phrase I say is we can map the company's genome. And the reason I came up with that phrase is back in the early 90s when I was a third-party recruiter, I actually placed 17 of the doctors that mapped the human genome.
Wow.
And I remember, yeah, it was a pretty cool project. And I remember talking to one of them on the phone one night, and I was kind of young, and I didn't really know what this was all about. And I'm like, why is this such a big deal? And the one guy said to me, he was like, well, it's not about curing disease, it's about preventing it. That's how I see the job assessment. It can prevent future problems from occurring. And when you use it in the beginning, from the get-go, it really helps get, I guess I would say, alignment internally. So if you do the job assessment and you have 3 to 5 stakeholders take it, and there's some discrepancies, if you have the conversation with them, you're able to provide them with the job target report after the conversation. And I always do this. We are literally getting them on the same page. You know, hey, this is what we all agreed to, right? And right now, alignment's crucial in this current job market because people have choices. So, you know, Eric, you're a smart guy. If you interview at a company with 4 people and were to ask them individually what does success look like in this role, if you get 4 different answers, you're going to go back to your spouse and be like, yeah, I don't need to go back for a second interview. Those people have no idea what they're looking for, and people have options now.
Right.
So getting them aligned internally is absolutely critical, especially when you're chasing top talent, because top talent, they're savvy interviewers. They're going to ask those kinds of questions.
So I'm going to stir the pot a little bit, and I'm going to go off already of our outline. Imagine that.
Of course you are.
I want to stir the pot a little bit and talk about this weird culture that we call the millennials. How important is it to have these things up front? The job assessment, their PI, their behavioral assessment, their cognitive assessment, and a structured interview. You know, I find that the younger population is kind of bright, and it's a wide open job market. And when they don't find a good fit, they just kind of move on. So, you know, do you have any, not get into a rat hole, but is there anything that you're seeing now with the younger generation? Because we talk a lot about them like it's horrible, but I just think they are showing us, because of the job market's wide open, that we really have the ability to really find what we like to do and be treated in a good way. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and keep in mind right now in 2019 that over 50% of the workforce is under the age of 36, and the millennials are older now. So 50% of the workforce are millennials. So they have things available to them that you and I did not when we were their age, Eric. They can look up interview guides. They can read articles in Forbes and Inc. and all the stuff online and LinkedIn for how to be savvy during an interview. And the other thing, too, is the average tenure for an employee right now is like 17 months. And it takes an average of 11 months to master a job. So employers are getting 6 good months out of people. And I find that hiring and retention are symbiotic. If you hire better, they're going to stay longer. If they stay longer, it'll be easier to attract new people, so on and so forth. So when it comes to attracting them, some of the tools that we have available to us, you can do, after you set the job assessment, you can get the, it's called the job target profile. And there's some language in there that's scientifically written to attract that pattern. So, you know, as we say, we tend to hire people for what they know and fire them for who they are. This is the who they are bit. You have to have the what they know reflected in the posting online. 8 years experience in this, master's in chemical engineering, whatever. But the who they know, you're going to get somebody else, because if there's some language in there that's going to repel someone, they might go, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to apply for that. That doesn't really sound like me. You'll do a better job of kind of weeding them out, so to speak. And I'm not a huge fan of using PI as a red light, green light tool, but this at least will get you better applicants. And then you know what you can live with as a hiring manager. Because if it's a limited talent pool, which we're finding a lot with people, you know, you place an ad on the internet and get 6 responses, and one of them's from the pizza guy. You know, you can look at that and narrow down the field. And if no one's a perfect match, you can actually have an intelligent conversation with the hiring manager and say, hey, this person's going to need to pick up the pace. This person here is going to need to dial up their detail orientation. What can you live with in this role? And then you give the hiring manager a choice, And that's really our job, is to use the data to provide that information.
Okay. So we've got, real quick, I know you're going to share some stories, and I want to have time for that. But we still have some more bullet points to go over. People see if we could just use your PI there.
Sure.
What might I put in my job ad to attract somebody like you? Say, hey, look, I want more Dave Nast because I really like him, which I can say for certain I would want more of you. All right. But if I'm trying to attract you, what might be some keywords that kind of set that off in the job pattern? Or the job
opportunities. I would say things like opportunities to work with others, opportunities to lead, chance for competition, whether it be commissions or something like that, variety. Also, something that's going to allow me to be flexible and improvise, something that's going to allow me to innovate and create new ways of doing things, fast-paced. I've got a really low C there. So things like that that's the type of thing I go, ooh, I might want to apply to this one.
Okay, good. So that just gives some people some ideas. What we recommend is having those behavioral pieces up front as far as you can. So you're really attracting those people to get them to read farther down. And, one of the things that would be nice if people were trying to attract you or you don't need a big job ad. We do better with bullet points, and it doesn't have to be a long job ad. So I want people to think about that too. But the next point we have there, Dave, is just narrowing down the field. I know I've talked to a lot of recruiters, and I'm going to hand this question off to you, but less people can be really scary when you start talking about flow, especially now. So can you speak to that of when somebody's using this tool, we're actually probably narrowing that candidate pool a little bit, which can be scary for some folks. But can you speak to that and why that's beneficial?
Yeah, it's well, number one, it's a huge time saver for the recruiter. I mean, there are times in the past, I remember back when the economy was a little different, we would place an ad and get 600 respondents. And we were still introducing PI later into the interview process. We were phone screening people based on the resume and then sending it off. And it was a huge time suck if they weren't going to be a big match or something like that. So introducing it earlier helps with that. Now, even today, when you have 5 people respond, you know what you're getting into when you have the conversation. And also, as you perfect it, if you look at what we call legacy data, and a way to do this, 2 ways really. You can sometimes you do the job assessment that maybe the 5 stakeholders weren't in agreement on everything, but they were in agreement on A over C. They wanted someone proactive. That's a must-have. We cannot have anyone who's C over A. It has to be A over C. So that helps narrow it down too. That'll save you some time. Another way to develop the non-negotiables, if the job is a position of multiples that's been around for a while, look at your top performers. What do their PIs look like? Do they have your non-negotiable? Is it in agreement with that? And then you can kind of develop that one thing. Finding a 100% match can be tough sometimes, but if you have that one non-negotiable, that will help get you down. And, we had that, Eric, when we were working with you, you'll remember we had that one non-negotiable. And the way we developed that is we were hiring folks basically to go out and do some sales and things like that and launch these different groups. So if they didn't have A over C, they didn't succeed. And it was time and time again. And we would make exceptions based on their background, their network, or whatever. That became the non-negotiable. We absolutely had to have A over C. So if you can do that, sometimes that gives some comfort to the hiring manager that says, where are all my resumes? And you could say, well, remember, we decided that they must have this. This is the best that we have. And hey, hiring manager, I don't want to bore you with 20 resumes. I'd rather bore you with 5 really good ones.
Yeah, we just had this happen. I mean, I did the job assessment internally. We're bringing somebody on. I'm bringing on a client service person in a couple weeks, and we put the ad out, and I got really frustrated because I actually got some good candidate flow, right? Coming in. And of course I did what on a few, not all of them, on a few, I did what I tell people not to do is don't look at the resume. And then just let down after let down after let down. But, I need somebody that really definitely has a high D because that's my lowest drive. So it has to be somebody who can compensate for that. And they have to be able to, I don't want somebody that I put some pressure on and they're kind of going to fold. I needed somebody that was a little quicker paced, and I waited, and then it hit, and it was just like boom, and just all those stars aligned. But that was probably out of 32 people. Really got 2 good candidates, just interviewed one, but she happened to align on behavior, cognitive, and some of the other things that we do. But I'll bring that up later too, because I want to talk next to you about interviewing these candidates. So can we actually use PI and analytics to structure our interview questions with candidates?
Yeah. When you match a PI to an established job target, we get the competency-based interview guide. And for those on the line that might know Lominger invented competency-based interviewing about 14 years ago. Those tell me about a time when style questions are experiential and they beg a story. That's where you really learn about how somebody makes decisions, how they take actions, how they communicate that to others. So I'm a huge fan on using the questions that are provided. You don't have to use all 8 that are provided, but if there's a couple, if somebody's got a low B and you want a high B, but it's not absolutely critical, I would still ask those questions because they're going to be aimed at the difference there. But keep in mind, persuaders, captains, and mavericks, they always ace the old style behavioral interview questions. The old "what would you do if" questions.
Yeah.
They've fallen out of fashion for a reason, because you don't know if you hired a good interviewer or a good salesperson. You usually find out around the first quarter or so. But persuaders, captains, and mavericks, they improvise well. They communicate verbally and often. They can frame answers in a way that helps them win. They're gifted at that, so they can kind of squeak by. But the other thing too is know who you're speaking with. If you have a low B on the phone and they take a moment to answer the question, that's okay. They're not making stuff up. That's how low Bs are. They process. They're living up to their pattern. And also the high Ds are going to ask a lot of questions back at you during the interview. So be prepared for that, because they're going to have some detail-oriented questions as well. So I like the interview guide that's provided, but I also look at the pattern and try to see what's going on. And I'll use the self-concept too as well, by the way. I'll try to figure out what's going on in their world today. That might tell you why they're looking for a job sometimes. And if their self and self-concept are perfectly aligned, I always ask the question, so why are you considering a change? It seems like your needs are being met at work. And who knows, you'll learn something in that question.
Yeah. I like to use that too. That's a good point, Dave. I like to use that too as an extra in the interview, just to see if that person has any kind of level of self-awareness of why they're leaving.
Yeah.
So that's good. And I just noticed in the outline I spelled a word wrong. I know we talked about it, but it says basis. It's supposed to say bias. Can you talk about the person or people that are interviewing the candidates? We talk about bias a lot of times, but does that actually exist?
So you're talking to somebody who's certified as an executive coach. So yeah, I think it does. We call it self-management in coaching, but I find that there are certain patterns that fall in love with themselves. Persuaders love talking to persuaders. Captains love talking to captains. Strategists do not always love talking to strategists, because if I'm right and I think that you're wrong, then we're going to have a disagreement on that. But yeah, I think you have to manage yourself in the process. I mean, I'm a really high B, so I have to remember to listen more. I figure during an interview, if I'm speaking 20% of the time, I'm doing it right. And that's always a challenge for me to do that. And also with a low C, I am not the world's most gifted listener. And the way I overcome that is I will take notes during the interview actively. If I can't write fast enough, I will type it out. And I tell people, if you hear me typing, I'm not answering emails. I'm taking notes on what we're talking about. I have to take notes in the moment, because my listening skills are suspect sometimes.
That's an extremely good point. I'm very thankful that you mentioned that, because some of us have that issue as well. You know, one of the things we do here, I've been doing analytics for a long, long time. And as we started our interview process with this person I was talking about, I'm out of the first interview. Even with the analytics, I know what there should be, but I know myself. I can almost, you know, I like a lot of people, have, you know, like everybody. So the last thing I want to do is start liking this person when nobody else does. So I stayed out of the first round of interviews just because of that bias. So it is there. You have to watch it. So even all these years of being and having behavioral analytics and cognitive analytics and all that, it's still there. So, all right. So the next point, Dave, and I know you got some good points here on ways to structure the offer. So say we found somebody. What might I do? Could I refine my approach with somebody just by looking at their PI? Can I make
I think
behaviorally?
Yeah, I find with the captains, the mavericks, and the strategists, I kind of give them the high points right out of the gate. So we got you what you wanted, you're paying this, doing that, whatever was important to them during the interview process. I hit them with 3 bullet points up front, and then I let them ask questions to go into it that way. And you can kind of, because if they don't get some of the stuff covered, they're going to ask it anyways, and they may even take over the conversation. Yeah, Dave, I know you're building up to something. Now I'm getting skeptical. Why don't you just tell me what it pays? So whatever it is they care about the most, I get to that first with those 3 patterns. With the persuaders, the altruists, and the collaborators, they want to chat about it. They'll be very polite in asking their questions, but what I really listen for is at the end of the conversation, I listen for the "oh, by the way," because those 3 patterns tend to be kind of polite. And if there wasn't a natural conversational segue to ask a question they really wanted to ask, they'll wait to the very end and go, "Oh, by the way, is this job going to be in Michigan, or is it going to be?" They'll ask that really important question to them. So that means a lot. That's a really important point for them if they're going to bring it up. So I always listen for that.
That's a good nugget there.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's been, I just noticed it as a pattern that kind of developed over time, especially with the altruists and the collaborators, even more than the persuaders. They wait to the very end and ask the stuff that really, really matters to them because they're trying to be polite and professional. But, you know, they won't interrupt you sometimes. The other thing I've learned, and this is not judgmental at all, if it's a high D and I'm making an offer, I block off more time on the calendar than I think I'll need. They have tons of questions. It's really important for them to get those questions. Even if you say it's going to be in the offer letter, depending on how you structure things at your company, some companies won't send an offer letter until they get a verbal yes. Well, that's going to be a long conversation for you because they're going to ask you every single thing that's there about the benefits and what the PTO looks like and what's the match on the 401k and what does that happen in this? Can you invest it in that? They're going to have a million questions. And it's not them being skeptical, it's how they learn. High Ds ask a lot of questions when they're ordering a pizza. It's just how they are. So I don't take offense to it with them, but I do allow more time for it, and sometimes even schedule towards the end of the day. That way it won't bump into my next call. And the other thing is the individualists.
Okay.
They're polite and they're quiet during the conversation. And then they'll say something like, "Okay, I'll get back to you." And it's really normal for them to take time to think about it, and they're incredibly hard to read. So sometimes as the recruiter, you get off the call going, "I don't know if she's going to take the job or not." And you really wonder and you worry about it. That's how individualists are. They're hard to read. They have their own way of doing things. They take time with stuff. They have their own process and routine, their own methodology, if you will. That's how they're going to do it. So I'll actually use those words in the offer. I'll talk about process. I'll talk about methodology, things like that to make them more comfortable. But I rarely have ever made an offer to an individualist and have them accept it on the phone. They'll even say, "I'll have to get back to you." And they'll call me 2 hours later. They'll email me that night, or they'll get back to me the next day. Sometimes they'll get back to me in 2 weeks. But that's how they are. So I don't take offense to it.
That's a good point, because especially I know even with a lot of recruiters in a lot of companies, they tend to be more wired like you and I anyhow. So that's another good nugget there. So we've made the offer, they've accepted, Dave. Onboarding seems to be a real critical piece right now. You and I are both working with a lot of clients. It's not that we can't get them the people, they just can't keep the people. So help
Yeah.
us understand a couple points on onboarding, and then we'll get into a coaching story that you have here as well. So just tell me when you get that slide.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't want to kill the clock. So what I do with a successful candidate is I'll provide the hiring manager with the coaching guide. I'll provide them with the person's PI report. I'll refer them to, if it's a captain or a persuader or someone like that, I'll refer them to the end of the PI report going management strategies for Sally, whatever that is. If they don't understand PI, if they're a manager that's never been through the manager's training, I give them the person's snapshot, and I'll give them the reference profile report sometimes, because it doesn't have all the ABCD language and all that stuff. They're not going to understand that anyway. So those reports are written really for anyone to understand. And the last thing is I encourage them right around the 3 to 6 month mark, do the scorecard. Do the scorecard with the new employee. See what they need, see what they're not giving them. If you don't like paper, you can do it in the software now, the management strategy guide for that person, and you can show them how to use it. You can bring your laptop into their office or whatever and just walk them through it. So I'm a big fan of that. But yeah, if you want to go to this story, I'll try to cue you. Eric's running the board here, so I'll try to. I have a little bit of animation, not much, but so this actually happened at a client of ours. The person on the left is the hiring manager. His name was Bill. The person on the right was a brand new hire. His name was Tim. They were targeting Tim's pattern. They wanted to persuade her for the role. So here's the backstory. Small company, 37 people, manufacturing, 7 of them are salespeople. The item that they sell costs about 800 grand. It's a 12-month sales cycle. It's highly engineered. And they were having trouble hitting their sales goal because they kept losing salespeople. It took a year to onboard these salespeople. The sales cycle was a year, so it took forever to turn a profit. So they'd get someone profitable, and then one of their seasoned people would leave. And that was really hitting them in the bottom line. So I checked in on this one. The guy on the right, his name was Tim. He was the first one they hired using PI. And I followed up with him about 30 days into it. And I called Bill on the left, and I said, hey, Bill, how's Tim doing? And he said, he's okay. He asked a lot of questions. They're good questions. All right, not a ringing endorsement. I called Tim on the right because I had met him at one point. I said, hey, Tim, just checking in. How's it going? He actually said to me, 30 days on the new job, I have no idea. Say more about that, Tim. And he said, well, I don't hear much from Bill, but whenever I do, it's about what I'm doing wrong. And whenever I ask him questions, he just refers me to the manual. And I'm like, oh, gee. So then I checked to see, I called Bill and said, Bill, did you do a scorecard with Tim? He's like, no, I haven't had a chance yet. I'm like, okay. So I did a call, and I put both their patterns up on the screen like we have them now. And I said, guys, I want to point out a couple of things about you. And so this is where some of the animation comes in, Eric. I said, Bill, you've got a really low B. So you don't say much, but whenever you do, it's about that high D. It's about doing things correctly. So I imagine that when you're talking with Tim, you're trying to make him better. And he said, yeah, that's right. Trying to give him all the tools he needs to succeed. All right. Tim hadn't really heard that way. And I said, Tim, you've got a really high B. You communicate verbally and often. You expect others to do that too a lot of times. And you have a really low C, so you're action-oriented. You'll do what we tell you to do. B over C is very much a pleaser pattern. So I said, so Tim, I imagine if we tell you what you're doing right, you'll do it all day long. He's like, yep. And I'm like, if we tell you what you're doing wrong, you'll stop it immediately. He goes, uh-huh. I said, I bet if we only tell you what you're doing wrong, you probably think you're doing everything wrong, don't you? And he goes, that's right. And then I waited. And it was uncomfortable. Bill's a low B. I needed him to think this through, and I waited, and crickets started chirping, and then all of a sudden, Bill goes, wait a minute, that's not right. Tim, you're doing tons of stuff right. I said, not good enough, Bill. What's he doing right? He needs to hear it. High Bs need feedback. So he laundry listed all the things he's doing right. So now Tim's feeling better about himself. And I said, guys, one last thing I want to point out. I said, Bill, you're a pretty high E. If you need more information, you're going to go look that up and do the research and all that stuff. I'm like, Tim's new and he's a low E. So he doesn't know how these puzzle pieces fit together. He needs the big picture, and that will help him. And he said, okay, sure. So I checked in about 60 days later, called Bill and said, "Hey, Bill, how's Tim doing?" And he said, "So much better." I'm like, "Well, what did you do?" He's like, "Well, he's on the road Monday through Thursday. We meet in my office on Friday mornings for about 15 minutes. We go through what he's done. We role play stuff. I show him where the answers are. He gets frustrated if Tim asks the same question twice week to week. So Tim's taking notes now. He told him, he goes, "It would help me if you took notes on what I'm saying." But they're communicating much better. So flash forward another 6 months, they hire another sales guy named Jeff, who looks just like Tim on paper. He forwards me Jeff's PI and says, "I'm not going to make the same mistakes I did with Tim." And I'm like, "Well, that's cool, but how's our friend Tim doing?" Tim's been on the job now for about 9 months. And he said he made his first sale on a 12-month sales cycle. And so then we went in, I guess we did a legacy data review maybe about a year later. Probably about 3 months after that conversation, so maybe a year after we did the last one.
Yeah.
They hit their sales goal because they haven't lost a salesperson for 2 years. And then I got an email this January. This all took place in late 2016. They had to change their goals for 2019 because they have the same sales staff. They haven't lost a salesperson in 3 years. They've had all 9 fully staffed. So if you look at Bill's pattern, not a natural sales manager. Here's the thing. He's an engineer. He was the technical sales assist to the old sales manager. He went on every sales call to answer all the hard questions. When the sales manager left, this guy, Bill, is the brother-in-law of the CEO. The CEO said, "Why don't you be sales manager? You've been on more sales calls than any of us." That's how that happened. So he's got a bunch of high Bs and a bunch of high As reporting to him. So he's learning how to communicate better with them. He's using the tools, and it's a struggle. But here's the thing. I appeal to Bill's high D.
Yeah.
He wants to do everything perfectly, so I tell him what perfect looks like.
Yeah.
And then he's doing the work.
Good point. Okay, Dave, we're starting to run out of time there.
Yeah.
We had another story there, but can we jump to the last point there before we take some questions? Give us your top 5 Nast tips. If it's recap, so let me just say what I took away. Being that active note taker, that's probably a big one. And the by the way was another nugget that I got from you. So give us the top 5 tips, if you will. Just break it down for us before we get off of here.
Yeah, I would say number 1, get alignment. That's what the job assessment's all about. Get alignment. Number 2, objective data gives you the ability to make informed talent decisions. It's not everything, but it has to be part of the decision-making process. 3, what can you live with, Mr. or Mrs. Hiring Manager? Perfect plus no experience versus not perfect and tons of experience. One can hit the ground running and they'll have some issues. The other one's soft clay, but it's going to take a long time to develop them. I provide the data to the hiring manager so they can make their decision. Number 4, remember who you're talking to, whether it be the candidate, the hiring manager, or managing yourself in the conversation. Have those PIs in front of you, or at least have them memorized so you know what's going on. And then number 5, you guys on the line, you're the expert. Use the guides and the tools. Speak in words. Don't speak in A, B, C, D unless the hiring manager has been trained. They're not going to get it as much. If you use the words proactive, quick to connect with people, those types of things, that'll resonate.
That's a very good point. Anything else you have for us today, Dave?
No, this has been a lot. It's been good. I'm curious to see if there are any questions and if there's anything I can help with there.
Okay, so we'll open it up to questions. Anybody that has questions can chime in now. We'll be able to unmute everybody. Anybody have any questions? No? Well, you must have been really good, Dave.
Here we go. See something in the chat box.
Yeah.
What is a client's best aha?
What is a client's best aha?
Wow, that's I would say, and this is going to sound a little bit silly, but when they go against the the job pattern, when they go against the job target pattern, that sometimes is an aha, because they'll hire someone from their gut, or this person was referred by somebody I know, like, and trust. I know they're not a fit. Let's give them a chance. And all those problems appear. I don't try to play the "I told you so" card. Now I use the data to try to get the best performance out of the person. And I try to remind them, if they really were a great match for this job, they'll have the time and the energy to give discretionary effort, get creative and innovative, where if they're spending all their time and energy just trying to match the job, and like if you look at someone's self-concept, if their self is not a match, but their self-concept is, they're trying. They're really trying. They're burning a lot of energy to try to match that job. Just think about how much energy they'd have to put towards discretionary effort and giving extra if they already were a match. So I try to do that instead of "I told you so." But I found the biggest aha to be when they go against the job target.
Good. Here's another question, Dave. What are good ways to let the employee know how to best work with management and to keep those reminders fresh? So let's answer the first one, and that second one's really good too. That's an excellent question, Renee. Thanks for that. What are good ways to let the employee know how to work best with management?
So the scorecard system, if you will, there's abilities for the manager to do a scorecard on the employee. There's the ability for the employee to do a scorecard on their manager. I'm a huge fan of just making that part of the culture and putting up the placards and all that stuff. I want people talking about it in that way. So if they know what their manager needs. So for instance, you could have somebody who is like an operator pattern reporting to a strategist or something. Or even better yet, a captain. Well, the captain, no matter, even if you have an appointment scheduled with them, you're interrupting them. If they're overseas, their biggest spread, and you come in their office at 2 o'clock for your appointment, they're doing something else. So I tell them, don't get offended. And if you have 18 things to cover, make it 3, and they might stop listening after the 3rd. The other thing, too, with a high A manager, if you come in with a problem without a solution, that's called whining. And if you give them the option to make the choice, that's what a high A wants to do. So if you can come in, so here's the problem, here's what I think we should do, A, B, C, D, what do you think? And then let the hiring manager go, do B. They like that. That's a meaningful interaction. So I would use the PI in reverse with your manager to know how they like to receive information and what they're looking for from you.
Okay. And then to keep those, I like that question, to keep those reminders fresh.
You know, if you're a practitioner, you probably have the flashcards. I know that sounds corny, but they work. The other thing to do, too, is I will sometimes just go in and read through a PI report. We tend to read through it once, and it's 2.5 pages, which for somebody with a low C like me, it's like, yeah, I'm just going to go right to the management strategies. I'll occasionally go in and reread that stuff. And the other thing that's shorter and to the point is the development charts. Okay. Whether it be for a manager or the personal development chart. It has strengths, cautions, and coaching tips.
Right.
The cautions are that person on their worst day.
Yep.
So I will sometimes brush up on that, especially for the plot points that are furthest from center.
Yeah, can I add something in there too? I just had a client ask me yesterday with that manager scorecard. You know how you can print that strategy guide out, and then it has a plan.
Yeah.
One of the recommendations that I've always recommended, and I think is a good recommendation, is to always review that every 90 days.
Yeah, the action plan. That's great.
Just to put it in a tickler there. And I was starting out with a new client yesterday, and they said, man, you want me to do that every 90 days? I said, it's better than a disaster every year. So
yeah.
You just keep it real like this. I'm thinking about this example that you gave, this story that you gave with Bill and Tim. You know, if I have a 90-day plan that I'm rolling out, where it's forcing that communication, but it's less of here's what everything you're doing wrong and here's what you suck at. It's more like, hey, look, how can I help? How can I help you do well in this role? So that might be another way, Renee, to keep those reminders fresh.
Yeah, and I found with the scorecard, like we had this happen where somebody was a 3 out of 12. And I said, you know, we don't have to go from a 3 out of 12 to a 12 out of 12. Let's try to go from a 3 out of 12 to a 5.
Yeah.
And then in 90 days, let's maybe do a new action plan and try to keep working on that. And it depersonalizes it too, by the way, because you're using data to discover what's going on in the scorecard. So it takes some of it's not like, oh, wow, she doesn't like me. It's like, no, this is the data. This is what's happening. This is what happens a lot when these two patterns collide.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Yeah, it takes the personalization out of it for sure. All right, how we doing on time? All right, it's quarter till almost, so we like to get folks out of here by 15 of, so you can get ready for probably your next 11 o'clock call, which probably Dave and I both have. Dave, this has been absolutely phenomenal. I love the tips that you gave to us. Hope we can get you back on another topic, maybe at a different date, if we could have you, if that's fine.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, so we'll talk later about that, but hopefully we can have you back. But thanks for all the good tips. To those of you that are still on the line, go out there. There's some good PI Jedi tips that we went over today, so let the force be with you, and we'll talk to you later. Take care. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.